Hello everyone, today we're going to talk about the modalities and if they're in scripture or not. Now, if you haven't checked out my other videos prior to this, I suggest you first go do that and to get caught up to speed, as this is kind of a more in-depth study and builds on itself. So to review a little bit first, so on my 4 living creatures video, I went over how the 4 living creatures mentioned in the Bible in Ezekiel and Revelations almost certainly points to the Zodiac. But more importantly, it highlights the pattern of the 4 elements in astrology, which are commonly used to define the zodiac signs along with the modalities, with each sign being defined by a combination of one of 4 elements and one of 3 modalities. So you have 4 times 3 equals 12 total unique combinations, which we know as the 12 zodiac signs. There's decently strong support. It points to the elements because, number one, and most importantly, the elements work. So we can see how they work in real life between me and you. Number two, the pattern of the elements is highlighted by the zodiac signs the 4 living creatures best translate to. But also 3, in Revelations, the 4 living creatures are listed in perfect order of naturally occurring element as they traditionally appear in the zodiac. So the question for the modalities becomes, if the 4 living creatures are representative of the 4 elements of the zodiac, and the 3 modalities go along with the 4 elements via our current understanding of the zodiac signs, are the 3 modalities also depicted or mentioned in the Bible? Since the elements are found in the 4 living creatures, that's the most obvious and likely location that we're going to look at. So let's take a look at the other facts surrounding the 4 living creatures in Revelations chapter 4. John mentions that the 4 living creatures are full of eyes all over, and that they each have 6 wings and are constantly praising God. Now we look at Ezekiel. They have 4 wings, the body of a human, or their appearance was like that, like a human. Straight legs, feet like a calf's. They seem to be on fire or have the appearance of coal on fire. Moved quickly, not turning as they move. Ezekiel also mentions the wheel next to each creature, beside it on the ground, appearing as a wheel within a wheel, and the eyes all along the rim of the wheels, and the wheels move with the creatures, and the spirit of the creatures seems to be in the wheel, based on what he says. Alright, so now let's compare these two. So the only consistent thing between the 2 visions is the faces of the 4, which is why most people focus on that the most. The living creatures are also depicted with wings in both, though they have 6 in Revelations and 4 in Ezekiel. They also have eyes that are not numbered, presumably too many to count. If it is a specific consistent number, we don't know because the text doesn't say that. In Revelations, the eyes are all over their bodies, whereas in Ezekiel, they appear to be exclusively on the wheels. Ezekiel gives a few more details on what they look like, which I don't really know what to make of that. But Ezekiel also has the wheel within a wheel, so to speak, that sits on the ground. The things that seem to be stand out as other particular consistencies is the eyes and the wings, as both are mentioned. So the question concerning the zodiac now is, do we see a set of 3 anywhere to represent the 3 modalities? At first glance, no. But if you think a little harder, yes. And here's why. So there's 6 wings, right? But wings come in pairs, kind of obviously. Just kind of think for a second. Having an odd number of wings doesn't really make any sense. Having an odd number would be worse for function, making something inoperable almost, fall right out of the sky. We even kind of see this same kind of logic with the 4 wings in Ezekiel. It's not 5 wings or 3, it's 4. For there's 1 less set of wings. So there's 3 sets of wings in the Revelations, but 2 sets of wings in Ezekiel. So we did find the 3 here within the wings. So let's consider this a little bit more. So a few things to note here as well. there's kind of two schools of thought about the four living creatures and many things in the Bible, really. They can either be symbols or real physical beings from another realm. Based on what we hear in Revelations in the throne room setting, and even arguably in Ezekiel, it appears that these are not just images or fleeting symbols, but real living beings that have a place in the throne room of God. So that doesn't mean that they aren't also symbolic, though. And since there's clear discrepancies and differences between the accounts in Ezekiel and Revelations, if you're going to go with the real beings perspective, then these beings are able to shapeshift or change their appearance. Since they can do this, it's not incorrect to choose one passage over the other. Both could have symbolic meaning for either the same or different reasons, or there could be no symbolic meaning in some of the forms. So all of these are possible scenarios, so it's difficult to have anything conclusive with these changeable details. Now, I say all that to say that for this reason, the three sets of wings in Revelations could be significant by themselves, even though it doesn't immediately match up with Ezekiel's account. That being said, there's a high likelihood that it does match up with Ezekiel, which we'll get into in a little bit. Second side note here, though, is we need to have a little bit understanding on just basic Bible symbolism interpretation. So we need to understand how God speaks, as it's often kind of cryptic. So Jesus spoke in parables so that people could hear, yet at the same time not hear, oftentimes to mask or disguise the true meaning so that his opposition couldn't incriminate him. But also the parables also kind of make things more relatable to us, so that we understand their purpose or what's going on. Like this, so like that. A good Old Testament example of this is the Feast of Passover, which is a parable ultimately of the sacrifice that Jesus would later undergo for us, and how we are to apply the blood of the Lamb to our dwelling, the place we live, and then the judgment of death will pass over us. So this is a huge study in itself, but the point is that the symbols and stories relate a purpose. Now, back to the four living creatures. All right, 3 sets of wings, or 6 total in Revelations, 2 sets of wings in Ezekiel, or 4 total, but also with a wheel within a wheel, or maybe even a pair of wheels, like we see with the pair of wings. Forget about the eyes and their differing location for a minute. I'll get into that in a later video, likely the next one. Basically, the difference between the accounts is 1 less set of wings and the addition of a wheel within a wheel. So if you were to swap a set of wings for a set of wheels, then technically speaking, you still have a set of 3 in the account in Ezekiel, though it's not obvious. But if this is the case and the intent of the swap, then what does a set of wings have to do with a wheel? How is that related, or how can they be interchanged? It took me some time to consider this and to try to find a commonality, and eventually it just kind of hit me when studying other prophetic interpretations. It has to do with purpose. So ask yourself, what is the purpose of a wing? What is the purpose of a wheel? The purpose of a wing is to allow flight, movement, right? What's the purpose of a wheel? Well, wheels can have multiple purposes, but the common purpose in those times was for locomotion, movement as well, going from point A to point B. But they did have other uses in objects or machinery as well. But if you look at the account in Ezekiel, you see a lot of mention of movement as well. So that theme is even in the text itself. So the wings and the wheels have the same general purpose. They're a means of allowing movement or translocation. The most generic in our understanding of what wings and wheels typically do. This is kind of where the whole symbology kind of just beautifully ties into the Zodiac, though. So if wings and wheels are theoretically tied to the 3 modalities, and the common theme was movement, then what does that tell us about the modalities? Now, as I was trying to figure out what exactly the 4 elements and 3 modalities were, my working hypothesis was the elements are kind of what the zodiac sign is primarily concerned with, or the what, so to speak. It's like fire signs are more preoccupied on actions. So if certain people of a certain sign, we're talking about things like, if you notice they tend to talk more about like action-oriented things, like activities and that kind of deal. Earth signs perhaps more focused on materialistic things or objects. Air signs more focused on logic or ideas. And then water would be more on like emotions, purpose, or intent. So elements were kind of like the what, or the general default realm of what the zodiac sign was kind of looking at or focused on. To me, though, the modality was, I kind of looked at how each sign primarily was looking at the element. So a cardinal sign might look at it one way, like changing a perspective. Fixed sign would be looking at things with more focus on one aspect, and mutable was also kind of like a changing perspective, but a little bit different nuance than cardinal. Now, in retrospect, I think my own personal bias as more of an observer than partaker in just everyday life influenced my thinking here. Because after seeing the common theme of movement in the 4 living creatures, I realized that movement was actually a much better description of what the 3 modalities actually were. They describe how the sign moves within a given element. So looking as I had theorized isn't helpful if there's no product beside that. So now I look at like the cardinal modality, the movement isn't just changing, but better defined as like initiative. It's initiate something, and when you follow that pattern, you get like a multi-perspective view, and you can get a lot of change here, not necessarily, but I noticed like the cardinal people tend to be more, when they change or move or something like that, they tend to be more decisive, whereas in like immutables, which also kind of can change a bit more, what you get is a more evaluative movement, or more of a kind of like an adjust and change kind of deal. So you can see a lot of the changing in the micro movements in both cardinal and mutable, but the cardinal signs are more of a decisive or quick methodology rather than mutable, which comes off as a more suggestive, evaluative, or kind of a more subtle methodology. And then fixed is just kind of the micro decision to continue, typically down the same path, not always. When you carry that out to its ultimate ends, it leads to like a more focused approach, and just it carries something out, kind of runs out things as far as they can go. So once you think of the modalities as movement, though, as we see here in the 4 living creatures representation, it actually becomes a lot easier to see in others, to just kind of try to see their general pattern of movement and conversations, life, and just thought and everything. So the theme of movement actually fits very well for the context of both the modalities and the wings and wheels, and with the 4 living creatures. But then go consider it even further. Each living creature, which is the embodiment of each element, has this set of 3, just like in the Zodiac. Each element occurs 3 times. So you have each element having 3 modalities, or 3 wings, or wings plus wheels, tied to it. There's potentially some deeper meaning to what the elements actually are in relation to them being represented by faces too. Perhaps with a face being how people see you, or maybe how you present yourself, or maybe with each animal having a certain function or specialty, and therefore each element has a specific function. I'm not completely sure on that interpretation, but I'd love to hear your take on it if you want to share it in the comments. Now, I understand the wings and modalities matchup may seem like a little bit of a stretch here to some, especially if you're still questioning if all the Zodiac stuff is real, and that's perfectly understandable. But if you've been keeping up this far with everything, it's fairly apparent that the Zodiac signs are in Scripture. Ancient Jews seem to think so themselves, to the point where they put it in their synagogues. besides all of the evidence I went over in previous videos. Considering that, and the fact that the 4 living creatures almost certainly points to the 4 zodiac signs as a minimum, it's really not that much more of a stretch from that point to consider the possibility that there's more there concerning the zodiac signs. Hopefully this will make a little bit more sense after I do my next video, which will bring this all together. So if you've been wondering why the book is called The 7 Spirits, when I've been talking about 12 and 4 and 3 and all the other videos, I'll get to that in the next video. You've been paying attention. It's not too difficult to put it all together what the 7 spirits are, but we'll go over that next time. See you then.